You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right. Yeah. How's everybody doing? This is Fade to Black, Thursday edition. Welcome, everybody listening around the world, around this great country of ours. This is Fade to Black. It is Thursday, April 3rd. 92 days into the new year. Kraken number one. Let's go. As always, we are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Let's go. It's going to be a fun one tonight. It's time to learn. As always, start off the show with a big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and you couldn't hear me right now. Think about it. All right, let's go. I'm settled in. Studio is dark. Really dark. Keith, I can't see the studio clock. All right. Today, actor Alec Baldwin is 56. His best quote of all time from Glengarry Glen Ross. Put that coffee down. Coffee is for closers. Oh, man. Singer Tony Orlando, 70 years old. That's just mind-blowing. He was pretty good in that movie with Ice Ice Baby. Played his dad, I think. Pretty good. Singer Sebastian Bach, 46 years old. And I know what you're thinking. I'm going to tell a Sebastian Bach story. And I can't. This is a family show. But I've got a few. Call me after the show. All right. Our dead guy's birthday's today. Well, the great one, Marlon Brando, born in 1924, died in 2004. And check this out. Hats off right now. Big salute. Astronaut Virgil Gus Grissom. That's right. Born in 1926 and died tragically in 1967 in that Apollo 1 fire. He was also the second American in space. Gus Grissom. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And we've been following Twitter a little more closely here on the show. I'm trying to stay alert. And so I've got a separate Twitter computer, actually, just sitting here, just for tweets. So you can follow us at JChurchRadio. And do me a favor. Going to irritate Keith. Is copy at DM Radio. Or whatever, Dark Matter Radio. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Is it at Dark Matter Radio? Keith, you can text me. and it'll pop up on the tweet feed on darkmatter.net. And if you're at darkmatter.net right now, then that means you're probably on the Fade to Black page, which is cool. That's great. Right above that, there it is. There's the Twitter. There's Facebook. Everything is there. Okay? And get some Twitter action going over at Dark Matter. And just got a first tweet in from Randy Cole. Just came in. My brother-in-law slapped Tony Orlando in a casino. That's how real time it is here. Oh, man. You got to love it. You got to love it. Okay, let's get going here. Tonight, we're going to have open lines. I'm going to open up the phone lines for John Major Jenkins. And I was talking to John today for a while before the show, and I've got to say, this is going to be a good forum tonight. Let's just go there. It's going to be good. There isn't anybody on planet Earth more knowledgeable about the Mayans than John Major Jenkins and the legacy. So he knows. If you've got a question, get it to me. Pierce the veil of the producers here and get it to me. All right. Let's see what else. Email throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. We'll get that. The call-in line tonight, as always, is 323-825-5045. We have that new page up, the Yekra Theater, over at jimmychurchradio.com. And the selection of movies that we picked here, it's from us here at Fade to Black, are up there. And we're going to change it up in a day or two, and we're going to do an extraterrestrial theme. Okay, that's going to be really cool. So we'll do that in a couple of days. We'll change it up. But the Yekra Theater, go check it out. Very cool. It's like a one-stop shop. And when you look at the movie selections, again, it's like a peek in the mind, the twisted mind that is Fade to Black and everybody here. And think about that when you're looking at those selections. Let's see. Tomorrow night, we're going to have David Marler, my favorite subject, one of my favorite subjects, and it's Black Triangles tomorrow night, and he is the cat for that. All right, so let's see. We started the broadcast off tonight with some weird stuff going down here in the country, so it wouldn't be right unless I just mentioned be safe out there. There's a lot of tornadoes touching down through the central part of the country, Ozarks, Mississippi River Valley, Texas, Ohio valleys. And, my parents live there. I've got family in the Midwest. Everybody be safe. There's nothing crazier than when those tornado alarms start kicking off. So please be safe. All right? And I do mean that. Last Friday during the show, we did have an earthquake during the show. And then last night during the show, and I did see the tweets come in, by the way. Chile had a 7.8 aftershock. And here in California, it just goes without saying, here we're acclimated. And we kind of make jokes about it in that, that was a 5.1, that was a 4.8, no big deal. No, earthquakes are crazy. And I can't imagine. I went through every earthquake here in California since I arrived in 83, 84, late 83 is when I got here in California. And I rode through all those, every single quake. And some were pretty friggin' crazy. And the big one in 94, I'm just going to share this with you. I'm going to spend 30 seconds on this because I've told the story so many times. And everybody in here in Southern California has got their story about what happened to them on that morning. And it was violent. It was crazy. And I lived in Sherman Oaks, and I was lived in a condominium south of the boulevard there in the middle of Sherman Oaks on the 4th floor. And when that quake took off, the power went out. I was in the dark. And to my left, now just imagine this for a second. To my left, about 10 feet away on a TV stand, is a 27-inch Sony Trinitron. Okay? After the quake ended, well, the first rumbling, I should say, the TV set was face down on my knees in my bed. Now, think about that for a second. Everything in my condominium was broken. There was nothing left of the condo, period. The building was red tagged, and I never slept another night in that condo. When I got out of the building and made it to the street, across the street, that building was collapsed that I had seen for years. An apartment building was collapsed and was crushed all the cars. And it was like I was in a strange world. I didn't know what was going on. And then I look again, and everybody's coming out to the street across Ventura Boulevard, and the two office buildings that were sitting there, and everybody in Southern California knows pretty much what I'm talking about right there at Noble and Ventura Boulevard, were in flames. In flames. Big 5-story buildings, office buildings, burning down. And then I look at my condominium in the back half of the building. This is a huge, like 80-unit condo. The entire back wall had fallen off onto the house next door. Now, and it was just utter chaos. And meanwhile, other aftershocks are going on. And it was that bad. That earthquake was horrible, horrible to go through. And so, and that's the end of the story. Okay, what went on after that went on, but it was that bad. So when I see 7.8, 8.2 down in Chile, that is no joke. No joke. And everybody here in Southern California, when we joke about and kid about, oh, that was just a 5.0, we know what a 7.8 is and an 8.2. That is insanity. I know what was that, a 7.0, 7.1 that hit us here? I can't imagine a 7.8, and that whole Richter scale thing is still funky to me, but I believe a 7.8 is something like 100 times as bad. Think about that. That's insane. And so, and we've got these tornadoes going on. So, everybody just be safe out there. And I just can't imagine Chile, and the fact now that they think that those earthquakes that we had on Friday, here we go, they might be related. And so everybody here is on pins and needles. So there you go. Okay, let's get to the happy stuff. Nearly 24 ships and aircraft are going to pick up the search in Malaysia. There's something going on there right now. I am just about at my wit's end with a lead and breaking news and news search areas and now this and now that. But there seems to be something a little bit more specific going on. And so the Royal Navy survey ship, the HMS Echo, is going to be doing a very specific search tomorrow. And they are on their way to look for pings. And I think that's fairly interesting. So hopefully tomorrow we'll have some kind of answer. David Letterman is going to retire. Check it out. Tonight on the Letterman Show, he's going to announce his retirement in 2015. When I was a kid growing up in Indiana, he was the weatherman in Indianapolis. Imagine that. Before Letterman was Letterman, he was the weatherman in Indianapolis. And I'll never forget, there was this one thing that stuck with me over the years. Moving on. I could tell David Letterman stories forever. But David Letterman's retiring. 2015. It's kind of weird. Leno goes down. Letterman just kind of hung out, just made sure he was on a little longer. That's the way I look at it. A Texas family apparently has found the El Chupacabra. Jackie Stock and her husband Bubba discovered a hairless a hairless, growling creature eating corn outside their home and captured it. There are pictures of it that I posted. Well, I didn't post, but somebody here posted. I'm sorry, I can't lay claim. I don't do everything. It's on Facebook. We didn't put it on the website. It's on Facebook at Jimmy Church Radio. Pretty interesting. And if you check that out and the links go over to, I think it's Mail Online, go check out all of the pictures. I don't know. My good friend Ron Lubin, who is a fabulous singer, unbelievable singer, who's in a band called Tiger, just posted that it's a hairless raccoon. I don't know, man. This thing's got hands. It's kind of freaky looking. Could be. I don't know. Reports are that maybe it's something with mange, but it's a pretty ugly looking thing with some pretty big eyes. I don't remember raccoons having eyes like that. And it's kind of hard to tell how big it is, but it is a crazy looking creature. Go check it out. Another really cool article that I found today. It was posted a couple of months ago, but I read through it today, and I found it really interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. And it was about the Sumerian king list. And the article, it's on ancientorigins.net, and it was written by April Holloway. But, and again, we've got the links up. Go and check that out. This is what's weird to me. And I know all the Planet X guys out there and Zachariah Sitch. I get that. I really do. But when I read through the article, I just want to go, come on. Seriously. This is what you're reading into, and people want to take this information literally and go, see, Zachariah was right. Well, go read this article. The fragments that have been dug up, and there's like 18 of them, and they first surfaced in early 1900. Hermann Hilprecht, the German archaeologist, scholar, dug them up. And the first section of them, I should say, since then, a lot more have been excavated. Now, the King's List it's all of the fragments, all of the different King's Lists that have surfaced, none of them are identical. But here, I'm going to read you a quote from one of the stones. And I'm quoting here. Quote, after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Uradug. In Uradug, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alajar ruled for 36,000 years. Two kings. They ruled for 64,800 years. End quote. The early list of 8 kings with a total of 241,200 years from the same time when the kingship descended from heaven to the time when the flood swept over the land, and once more the kingship was lowered from heaven after the flood. 241,200 years. 8 kings. This is where Sitchin was right. That's what they say. I disagree. I just can't, and I don't know if it's metaphors, if it's myth, but you can't take this kind of stuff literally, can you? Tweet me. Tell me I'm wrong. The U.S. has just gotten a new hyper-accurate atomic clock. A new atomic clock so accurate it will lose or gain only 1 second every 300 million years. It's called the NIST F2, the NIST F2. It's been in development for about a decade. It's more accurate than the current F1 clock, 100 times. The clocks work by using lasers to create a fountain of cesium atoms. Pings from those atoms, as they move, are counted to measure the exact length of a second. I'm a big watch guy. Got a lot of watches. They're all cheap. Don't think I have a collection of Rolexes. Nothing like that. But I have automatic watches. Everything that I have is automatic. Whether it's nice or inexpensive, it doesn't matter. They're all unique. But I'm a big watch guy. I'm a big time guy. I like clocks. I have clocks everywhere. I have the studio clocks up on the wall in front of me, displaying the time around the world. I've got a really cool little Ferrari desk clock to my left. I take off my watch before every show. I don't have it on my wrist. And I put that down in front of me. I've got clocks everywhere. I'm a big clock guy, but none of them are accurate. And I could not imagine a second every 300 million years. It's absolutely incredible. All right, we're going to take our first break here. When we come back, we'll have the man, John Major Jenkins, on the line. I want everybody to get ready. Do send us an email, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio. This is Fade to Black. We are on the Dark Matter Radio Network. It is Thursday, and we've got a great show lined up. So get comfortable, turn out the lights, and listen to what John Major Jenkins has to say. He's got a lot to get off his chest. He's an angry man. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be back right after this. Don't touch that mouse. Enjoy Little Doug Aldrich. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
I love Starbucks. Fade to Black. Fade to Black on a Thursday. Shoot us an email to Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. Pierce that veil. The producer's right here at the studio. Let's see how good you are. If it gets into me, it's worthy. Worthy of John Major Jenkins. Follow us on Twitter @JChurchRadio. Let's go. All right, I'm ready. Cue the music. John Major Jenkins is a pioneering voice in the evolving 2012 discussion with over 20 years of experience defining and debating the issues. His work has been featured since 1998 in media produced by ABC Nightline, the U.S. News and World Report, the New York Times, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, the History Channel, and NBC Sci-Fi Channel. He has taught at numerous institutes and universities nationally and abroad, including the Universidad Francisco Marroquin in Antigua, Guatemala, the Esalen Institute, Kingsley Hall in London, the Society of Henry the 13th in Belgium, Kingsley Hall in London, the University of Southern Oregon, and the New England Antiquities Research Association, the Institute of Maya Studies in Miami, the Society for American Archaeology, and the Naropa University. And John, I so humbly apologize for messing up that intro. Are you with us, sir?
I should have made that easier for you.
Yeah, man, that is a serious. That's a test. When you go to when you're an aspiring broadcaster, and you start your courses, they teach you. You go through all of these tongue and lip exercises that you're supposed to do before every broadcast. And it's ridiculous, the words and the sounds, and to what, you look around the classroom when this is going on, it is one of the funniest things ever. But you know what? They teach it for a reason. And I didn't do it today.
The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain.
Yeah, they have all these lips stretching and tongue stretching, but it really works. And there you go. I should be shot. So there you go. All right. How are you, man? Everything good?
Yeah. It's great to talk to you. I enjoyed our pre-interview chat, and I'm looking forward to getting into some stuff.
Well, you know what's funny, and you and I did it today. It happens every single time. The guest and myself, we're both excited. We're fired up, and we're passionate about the subject. And we start talking, and I just catch myself. I almost nearly have to stop because everything that we talk about before the show never gets on the air because we've already, our brains have already digested it, and we go into other areas. And I always, hey, man, okay, stop right there. Let's not go any further. Let's save this for the show. Not so with you and I today. we kept going, and I just your passion with this is it's the same thing that I share, and the two of us just got going. And
it's the conversation. I got a million of them, so we can just keep going off in different directions. But what I like already, Jimmy, is that talking to you earlier and talking to you now, you're the same guy on the radio. I really appreciate that because I've done hundreds and hundreds of radio interviews, and sometimes there's a bit of a shtick going on, and the personality changes when you get on the air. And so, hey, let's just be real.
Well, and I appreciate that, and the audience understands that too. I definitely know from the interaction that I have with everybody out there every single day that they understand. They are used to, just getting comfortable and seeing where this thing ends up every single night. And there isn't an agenda here. Well, the agenda is knowledge. The agenda is learning. And the audience is investing their time with you and I, John. They truly are. And I am thankful for that. And I totally appreciate it. And they get it now. And and like I said this afternoon when we were talking, I was like, this is what we're going to do tonight. So right now, what we're doing right now is going to be on the show tonight. So, and there's always one generic question that I start off with, and it's a question that almost every interviewer does, and I hate to start things off this way, but we just kind of have to just kind of set the stage, and then we'll let the conversation go where it may. But out of all the subjects, and for you, it was the Mayans, but out of everything out there in science and archaeology and history, you chose the one thing, and we talked about this earlier, but you chose the one thing that probably wasn't the most popular subject when you dived into it, and probably was a subject that was difficult to get information on back then, which was, the Mayans. So how and why did you choose that? What happened?
Well, it kind of chose me, really. I mean, I've been asked this question in various forms, like, how did I get involved in this work? And it's one of those things because it is sort of part of my, so deeply embedded as part of my path. I don't even understand why, but if I cast back and I think, well, let's see, there was that first trip that I took in 1986 down to Mexico, that was sort of a beginning point of my fascination with the Maya. Well, wait a second, though. There was 2 years before that, I saw that National Geographic special, and then before that.
Right,
so
right.
you can just trace it back. I don't know, maybe it goes back 5 lifetimes or something. But I think I've always had a fascination with ancient cultures, with astronomy in particular. I mean, I can remember going out into the backyard with a telescope and my dad, when I'm 10 years old, and looking up at Jupiter and Saturn's rings and the moon phases. And so I think I was sort of made to do this work, and there's a unique confluence of things that one does sort of have to juggle in order to get a handle on the Maya stuff. I mean, it's not just archaeology, it's not just astronomy, it's all these different things combined. So, I'm really glad that the path opened out for me, but I had to make some choices along the way. I could have gone down one road that would lead me into having a PhD and teaching in some university, but I wasn't really wanting to do that because I knew there was a lot of edge work that needed to be done around reconstructing these obscure aspects of the ancient Maya world, and so I knew that wasn't going to be the path for me. And yeah, you're right, though. Back in the late 80s, stumbling into this 2012 enigma, there wasn't much out there to sink my teeth into, so I had to sort of do the legwork and hit the books.
Well, before we get into what went right and what went wrong in December of 2012, that's a whole discussion. So before we get there, let's start off with a couple of things. One, do you think that the Spanish, when they did the destruction that they did far and wide, and literally tried to erase the Mayan civilization from history, which was the goal, do you think if they knew what they were doing and destroying, do you think that they may have had second thoughts and to preserve the history there?
Well, for the most part, there were sort of two factions. There was the inquisitorial bonfires that truly did believe, those conquistadors and the people that were trying to deal with the Maya. They truly did believe that they were devil worshippers.
Right.
They didn't. They would see these incomprehensible signs in the Maya books and all these. I mean, at the same time, they must have been impressed by the sheer grandeur and scope of this civilization that they were conquering. And, I think that on that level, there probably was a fear around, they were in awe, and maybe they were devil worshippers, or so they thought. And so they better, do away with them as quick as possible. Otherwise, they're going to be in trouble. But the Maya did have a few champions. There were some sensitive, philosophically minded, people like Fray Bartolome de las Casas in Chiapas, and even some of the same Spanish overlords that destroyed the books had a secret fascination with them, and therefore, actually, saved some of the information for us today. But it is a sad situation, though, that so much was just cast into the bonfires, and
this is the thing. That is absolutely crucial, critical, and crazy at the same time. The only thing, and we talked about this earlier, but the 4 codices escaped. 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's it. And when you think about, and you just said it, mountains, bonfires, everything. I mean, the percentage of information that escaped in those 4 codices. Well, okay, we have the monuments and we have the inscriptions and we have all of that as well. But as far as written material, That's all that was saved. In a percentage aspect, I don't even know what that would be. 0.00001. I mean, it'd be like, a couple of pages of Time magazine and then the rest of the United States burnt down, and that's what you're basing all of the Mayan knowledge on. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's
Sure,
tragic.
well,
it's absolutely tragic. Now,
even George Stewart, the archaeologist with National Geographic back in the 70s, he said that, what we're finding down there and what we're able to uncover right now is probably about 1% of what was there. And he was just talking about the temples and the pyramids in the jungle. And since then, some of those hidden gems in the jungle are being uncovered, but I think that's 1%. So it is a puzzle and a challenge to try to reconstruct what the ancient Maya really knew, how sophisticated they were in terms of astronomy and all these other things. But that is a challenge and a puzzle that's quite intriguing to take up.
Now, we were, I don't want to keep referencing earlier, but we talked for a long time on a lot of different subjects. But earlier, we talked about the massive, how do I want to say this? The amount of researchers and professionals, these Mayan scholars that suddenly surfaced out of nowhere. We can go back maybe as far as, maybe 2007, 2008, when this wave started to really occur for the prophecies and that were to happen in December of 2012. Mm-hmm. But also, there wasn't much information for them to base all of their expertise. They're so, I'm doing quotations right now, to make them an expert in because you were right there in the midst of all of it. Where were they getting all of this knowledge? What were they basing it on when you and I know that there was 4 codices, there was, there were, nobody was going down into Guatemala and climbing around, doing cave rubbings. That wasn't going on. Where were they getting all of this knowledge?
Right. Well, as you pointed out, the fact is that the vast majority of professional Maya scholars did not treat 2012 seriously at all until 2006. And I'll explain why 2006 was kind of a watershed date. But all through the 90s, I approached the question through asking the right questions, such as where was this long count calendar that gives us the 2012 cycle ending date? Where was that calendar invented and when? And the answers were in the archaeological literature. The archaeologists, knew that this early site called Izapa, the Izapan civilization, is how Michael Coe referred to it. It was a transitional culture between the older Olmec people and the emerging Maya, and it was thriving about 2,000 years ago in southern Mexico. So I went to Izapa, I studied the site, and I found that, wow, this was a really, really interesting site with carved monuments depicting the Maya creation myth. It had archaeoastronomical orientations. There was a lot there to get a handle on what these people who created the long count calendar were thinking about. And that's where a lot of my research came out of that and, was published in my book, Maya Cosmogenesis 2012 in 1998. But all through this period, there was not a word from scholars. I mean, it was like, for them, it was cue the laugh track. I mean, they immediately went to this fairly juvenile place and appointed themselves as sort of like 2012 debunkers because they weren't taking it seriously. But this 2006 date is when it became important for them. To answer your question, is they were sort of forced to treat 2012 as a real artifact of ancient Maya thought because in 2006, an inscription from a site called Tortuguero that actually mentioned the 2012 date finally came to widespread attention. And after that, then a few of the scholars started treating it seriously.
With all of the versions of the long count calendar, the different carvings, were these at different locations? Were they all found at one location? And were they all identical?
Well, yeah, there was really one consistent usage of the long count calendar. There wasn't a confusion of datings or anything like that. So, going back to the first long count date actually appears in the archaeological record in the 1st century BC, and in the region around Izapa, and that's why we look to Izapa as a place of study to understand the whole origin place of the calendar in 2012. But does that answer your question?
Well, sort of, but I have seen so many different different carvings, rubbings, and so forth, and drawings of those. And I'm just wondering, was there just one long count calendar that was discovered, or were there different versions of the calendars in different Mayan cities? Which would be different countries down in Central America, Guatemala, Honduras. Right. So were they all identical? Each one that was found geographically in a different location?
They were congruent with each other. So the timing and the dating, the count of days, was consistent throughout. That was a very, very important thing in the Maya world. The Maya, of course, were time obsessed, but they also did rituals on certain days in the calendar. So it was kind of an inviolable thing. On principle, they couldn't just mess around with it and switch the days out here in this city and then over there they'll do something different. No. It was like the glue of all of Mesoamerican civilization, not just the Maya, but even further to the west, the 260-day sacred calendar was followed. They didn't have the long count off, towards the west in central Mexico. The long count is really a uniquely Maya invention, but other parts of the calendar systems were shared.
And this is so fascinating to me. When you're looking to the heavens 600 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, that's one thing. When you're reaching back to the times of the Spanish, arriving, and you're looking, technology was very, very limited. And then when you go beyond that, backwards in time, and you're looking and you are measuring days, and you manage to put it together where now suddenly you are able to accurately reach back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I don't understand, and I need your explanation how were they able to accurately time the stars, time cycles of time, and get it to these long counts of thousands of years. I don't understand. And how were they able to precisely do it? They didn't have telescopes. So how did they get it done? It's a head scratcher for me.
It is. It's astounding. And, in recent years, we are really getting a grasp on how they were doing it. When you've got something like the long count in place, which is a day count, and then there's periods within there where you've got, a period of, specific number of days, like, a 360-day period, 20-year period, a period just under 400 years. When you've got this count of days happening, you sort of have a framework within which you can start to track some of the astronomical cycles that you can observe. And I think that the Maya had almost like an elite squad of sky watchers.
That's my point. That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. That's the only way it could have. Somebody was standing on point 24 hours. They always had somebody. Then they had to, know where Venus was. And to calculate, I forget the number, you're going to correct me, but like a 580-day Venus, 584 Venus day cycle. How in the world did they get that done? So,
there's easy. Venus will rise as morning star every 584 days. So
somebody was standing out there for 584 days, and they were. I mean, were they striking days off in the dirt?
Oh
And
no, well they had they had a certain amount of technology around techniques and devices for shadow casting, and they had a written corpus. Of course, as you know, the books, of course, were perishable, so most of them are gone. But there's a lot of things recorded on the ceramic vessels, painted onto the ceramics, and also carved into the stone inscriptions that survive. And so they had their methods, and they didn't have to be supernaturally prescient or guided by beings from other planets or anything. They were good observers, just like the ancient Greeks. One correspondence or comparison that I like to make is modern science recognizes that the Greek astronomer Hipparchus discovered this slow shifting of the heavens called the precession of the equinoxes.
Mhm.
It's a vast 26,000-year period. He was observing the rise times of a certain star and noticed it shifted, and it shifts 140. It shifts 2 degrees in 140 years, and with that, he could sort of extrapolate the full cycle out from there. He didn't have telescopes.
Right.
And the Maya, and he was doing that in the 2nd century BC. The Maya, could easily have done something similar without the aid of telescopes. They had a certain kind of genius, I think, around observing nature and the cycles of nature, and they learned from nature.
Well,
Yeah.
and we recognize today, and it's taught today. We get the Greeks. We get what the Egyptians were working on, and we appreciate. And you said the key word there, genius. And it almost happened. We crested with the Mayans. The genius of the Mayans was starting to get recognized, and now 2012 has come and gone, and it's like the respect that the Mayans it was almost there. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And it's not talked about today. Here we are in 2014, and the long count calendar and the greatness of it and what it did and its accuracy and how far back and how far forward. It was all there, and now it's not talked about today. I got to ask, what went wrong, and why aren't we continuing to wake up with the Mayans?
Well, I think I have an answer to that. It's maybe one answer of several. But, yeah, it's very unfortunate that 2012 came and went. There was a lot of attention going to 2012, at least, if not the Maya. If there was attention going to the Maya, it was portrayed in a fairly denigrating way, with the assumption that the Maya were atavistic, bloodthirsty savages that were sacrificing hearts and their people, and tearing hearts out, and that they just created this calendar that predicted the end of the world. Well, dig a little deeper into Maya calendar kindergarten, and you learn very quickly that the Maya didn't have a concept of apocalyptic doomsday connected to 2012. They had a cyclic time philosophy and a very sophisticated and beautiful kind of philosophical understanding of time that emphasized transformation and renewal. And not only that, but the idea that human beings are participants in these great processes. It's not a predetermined, fated anything, whether it's a enlightenment or a doomsday. So now what I'm getting at here is that I think, throughout the 20th century and even going back further, there's been a fairly negative attitude towards Native Americans. We inherit this prejudicial belief that they're savages, and that went hand in hand with the whole manifest destiny of, go west, young man, and the pioneers had to conquer the West and all that. So there's been this kind of ingrained, reflex among the not just the population of people, but in the professional classes. And so we had this opportunity with 2012 to
learn,
look closely,
right,
and learn and celebrate the innate genius of the ancient Maya, and also the survival of the Maya culture today down in places like Guatemala. That's something that inspired me deeply in my whole path, was the trips that I took down to Guatemala and making friends among the Maya. And so there was this embedded prejudice, I think, towards, and the media was complicit in reinforcing this, that no, it can't be allowed. The Maya could not have been geniuses.
Right.
So the problem goes very, very, very deep.
Well, here somewhere, but when I lived down in Panama and in Central America, there were, throughout Costa Rica, Guatemala, I'm telling you what you already know, but you could go to these Mayan temples back then. This was 30, 40 years ago when I was there, 30 years ago. But when I was there, everything was overgrown with weeds. There weren't tourists. You could just walk around and check out what you could find. A lot of the stuff wasn't cleared out. There's still tons of stuff down there that we don't even know where it's at. We have to go and discover it. There's probably huge temples down there to this day that haven't been found yet because it's been overgrown. And I'm not exaggerating with that statement. But when I came back to the States and I started talking to my friends and showing them, cave rubbings, wall rubbings of they were like, wait, who's the Mayans? And it was astounding to me that anybody that I spoke to, it was like I wanted to go and preach on the mountains. Hey, you got to check this stuff. Nobody had heard anything. I was so glad to see this momentum happen in 2000, and it started to roll and started to crest, and I was so happy for that. And it just ended bad. And the whole doomsday thing that was the legacy, of the Mayans was not right. And with all of your research, with everything that you have done, was there ever anything that even mentioned the end of the world? That December 21st, it was all going to be apocalyptic and we were all going to die. Was there ever anything like that even suggested it?
Well, it's a very interesting question. In the not in the evidence that is related to the 2012 date. The 2012 date is a period ending in the calendar, and it's the end of a big period in the calendar, a period of some 5,125 years. And because of that, it can be associated with this doctrine of world ages that you see in the Maya creation myth. And there's a larger Mesoamerican idea. You see the idea in many different places.
Right.
And in some arenas of expression, you have the idea portrayed, that humanity moves through chapters. And at the end of each chapter, an end of an age happens. It's the end of a world, not the end of the world. And sometimes the imagery, like on the Aztec sunstone, which is a depiction of sort of the world age doctrine, having 5 world ages and so on, there's symbols that relate to the different world ages, and the interpretations that were made by those early archaeologists that started to read these things. They were so literal minded that they looked at these images and did not interpret them as metaphors for transformation. It's almost like, what I used to say is that if you look at 2012 and see the apocalypse, you're not looking deeply enough at the phenomenon. The end of a world is not the literal end of the world. There's a whole very interesting philosophy and teaching that goes with this. So what I've tried to do is to sort of elucidate the deeper teachings that go with the world age doctrine, because you never see a final end of the world in apocalypse. You see humanity transforming itself and renewing itself into the next world age. So that's the thing to emphasize.
Well, yeah, but that's not romantic and exciting, I guess, to the doomsday profiteers. And I hate to call a spade, but that, you know what I mean? If that was the message that everybody wanted to bring out for December 2012.
Well, you're very kind in your terminology, Jimmy, because I've referred to them as the Doomsday Pimps.
Yes, and I'm trying to be kind. I am, but it angers me, and the amount of DVD sales and would have been minuscule if that was the message that everybody was trying to profit on back in 2012.
Right. So it is a strange topic. 2012 has been a very, very interesting and unique topic to be engaged in. When I started writing about it back in the late 80s, I didn't have some, plan that it was going to become a hot topic, and I just was unfolding my own research sequentially through the years. I would not have published any of my books if I didn't feel like I was discovering new things that needed to be shared.
Right.
That's what drove it. It's just a good old-fashioned, let's get together and collaborate and figure out what the ancient Maya were thinking about this 2012 date. But yeah, in some sense, I wish we could have a do-over.
Yeah, right,
but
right.
We're not going to, but at least we can reflect back on and take a cold hard look at what happened and maybe separate out the wheat from the chaff and talk about the interesting things that did happen.
Well, okay, these are some questions that are definitely, you and I are just sitting on my couch. Now I'm going to ask you some technical stuff that only means something to me, and I hope somebody out there listening goes, "Oh, great, Jimmy, I needed you to ask that." Why the Mayan civilization didn't? It wasn't 5,000 years old. It wasn't 10,000 years old. Why create a calendar that goes backwards? I understand frontwards, but why go backwards if nobody was alive back then? And why make it so technically perfect?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is the stuff I love. It wasn't so much a calendar that went backwards, but they were projecting forward to the end point of a process. Because in Maya thinking, they believe that the important thing happens at the end of the process, and that important thing is birth. It's a strange, it seems like it's an inverted notion, but it's really rooted in the 9-month period of human gestation. And the Maya were very tuned into these organic cycles, and they knew that when a woman was pregnant and the baby was growing, they were looking forward to that ultimate dramatic moment in the future when the birth would happen. Similarly, you see in the calendar system that they named the different periods in the calendar, and they named the period that you are currently in right now by its last day. So, this seems a bit strange, but it's because they believed, there's a principle in science and philosophy called teleology. It's that idea that things can be perceived as moving towards some ultimate state. And it is a debate in some philosophical circles whether, the tree is designed to produce the fruit, and that is its raison d'etre, or reason for being, or if, from another vantage point, the tree simply grows in a sequential, linear, cause and effect way out from the seed. Well, the fruit becomes the seed. So there is this cyclic process going on, and we start to get into these really profound, interesting areas of what I call, Maya time philosophy, or perhaps Maya metaphysics. And I think it rivals the cool stuff we can explore with Oriental metaphysics and those profound, non-dual philosophies of the Far East, and this is the kind of stuff that I love to get into.
Are you able to read Mayan?
No, that's a very, very specialized area. I have learned more about it as time has gone on, and I've paid attention to it. And
well, there's a reason for the question. Okay, so how many scholars in the world, archaeologists, right now can really read Mayan?
Well, they tend to be a pretty reserved bunch, and I think there's quite a few of them lurking in the corners. There is perhaps, I would say, maybe 20
Exactly.
who are proficient with it. Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
That's it. 20. So all of our knowledge is basically coming from, going back. We can go back a few decades here, but it's only coming from a handful, a real handful of people.
Mhm.
That's it. Why? So when you say interpret or translate, literal, or the different ways to look at the Mayan language and what they were actually trying to say and where they were saying it. You have the four codices, and then you have, and I want to talk about that actually in just a second. Then you have everything that is going on in the temples and walls and jars or what have you, down in Central America. But that's it. And why did everybody try to make themselves an expert? And I know you're angry about this, as angry as I am, but they're basing it on nothing. That nobody could read it. They were basing all of this prophecy and end of the world, doomsday. You've got to stock up on water because it's all coming to an end. Scare tactics and fear, when really they couldn't go and read any of the Mayan carvings if they wanted to.
Well, I think you're referring to the vast, marketplace.
Yes, that's exactly the media.
Yeah, it became its own sort of idea or icon, and I think that it was the perfect thing that the media and authors who want to, write books and sell books, it's the perfect thing. It's like, if it bleeds, it leads. It's what the media loves. It's what's going to sell. And I was always trying to bring the conversation back to the basics of how the Maya calendar works, how Maya thinking works. And we do know a lot about that. I mean, it's not just the 20 specialists who can decipher the inscriptions. I mean, they do produce, some things, but there's another 500 scholars around them who are working on archaeoastronomy or ethnography or archaeology and iconography, the symbols, that kind of thing.
Right.
So Mesoamerican studies has progressed leaps and bounds with some adequate translations of the inscriptions for sure, but there's a lot of other studies that go along with that. 2012 was never really part of the conversation for them. In fact, I think most of the professional scholars kind of treated it with contempt or something, and they already saw that it had been colonized by some popular writers. As you know, like in the 80s, there were writers on 2012. Terence McKenna had mentioned it. Jose Arguelles had his whole sort of dream spell system built around it, and the whole harmonic convergence thing, which happened in 1987. It wasn't, specifically about 2012, but it was putting these things on the map. And I think what I've observed is that in that realm of the popular marketplace, 2012 started out being recognized as being rooted in the Maya stuff, but it progressively got pulled further and further away from its rooting in the Maya world. It became just an icon to put on the marquee for some conference on, spiritual awakening or doomsday or aliens or whatever, what have you.
Did it start to? Were people making stuff up?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, just creating. I mean, making it up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there was that was the problem, that for some reason the supposed researchers or writers who were writing about 2012, you would hope that they would at least do a little research on the basics, but they were making up stuff about the basics of how the Maya calendar operates and just kind of going out from there. There is a core idea that I think was embraced in the so-called New Age movement, and that is the idea of renewal. And the fact is that there's plenty of evidence within the Maya world itself that the Maya had a doctrine of cycles and world ages, and they had this idea of world renewal at the end of a period in the calendar. Well, that's 2012. So by happenstance, you might say, one of the ideas that's embraced in the New Age community is something that's central to the Maya doctrine of time. So that there are these similarities going on, but there's also just a lot of mess that had to be sorted out, which I tried to do in my 2009 book called The 2012 Story.
I can just see you back then because you were in all of the documentaries, you were on all of the television shows, anything that had to do. You were the guy that looked like a very smart, grounded, rounded guy. The professor with the pipe and the smoking jacket with the leather patches on the elbows. That was you. You were the guy that added sensibility to the argument, or at least that's the way that they wanted you projected. That's my vision. I don't think that I'm wrong, but let me get to my point. I can just see you when you were listening to other, people spew, and that you were trying to get the correct message out. And then when it got to the editing room, and I know that you've said this, but it got to the edit, they cut you short right when you were saying the correct thing. And was that frustrating for you? I mean, because you must have been trying to speak the truth,
sure,
but you just couldn't get it out. And what your message wasn't as sellable as the next guy that, where they were trying to capture him speaking about doomsday.
Right. Well, you have to remember that it was sort of a frustration that was 6 months delayed, because I would go into the studio, and I've been doing, media, for quite a while, and since the early 90s, and I learned how to say things succinctly. I know they don't like to go into long elaborations, although I tend to like to do that myself. But for the purpose of conforming to that, style, I could say things very clearly and succinctly. And I kind of pride myself on that. So I would walk away from one of those 2-hour interviews going like, oh yeah, I nailed it. I nailed it on Izapa.
Right.
I always wanted to talk about Izapa because Izapa is the origin place of the 2012 calendar. Let's go there and find out what they were thinking. You would think that would be like the headline. What I found 6 months later, when that documentary or program would actually air, I'd watch it and I'd go, oh my God, what happened? What did they do with all those gems that I handed them? For some reason, Izapa, I worked so hard for about 10 years to get one of these places to go with me to the site of Izapa,
right,
and look at the throne and the ball court and the carved monuments. It's a site that was made for a documentary, and it didn't really happen until I guess I would say that a young filmmaker named Sean Paul. Finally, we went down there together. It was kind of on a shoestring, but he was producing this documentary. We went down there in 2008, and his documentary finally came out in 2012. And by that time, there were a few other mentions of Izapa here and there, but unfortunately, I was never able to raise the funds or facilitate a focused presentation of the Izapa material, apart from stuff that's on my website.
I want everybody to go. You know what we're doing right now. Go over to jimmychurchradio.com. Scroll down on the homepage. As always, there's a gallery that that John sent us. There's 9 pictures, actually 8. The headshot of John we're not going to talk about. We don't need to.
Yeah, that was just the headshot. Didn't have to put that one up there.
Yeah, good-looking guy.
All right, so let's start really quick. Well, actually, as everybody is steering over to the website, it's like lemmings to the sea right now, John. So let's everybody get settled and get down to where the gallery is. And then I'm going to ask you this one question that I have to ask.
Sure.
December 21st. What were you doing that night? Did you have friends over at the house? Were you?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, December 21st of 2012 was, that whole month was just crazy busy. I'm not even going to get into most of it, but the plan was to, we had organized a conference to take place at the Maya site of Copan in Honduras.
Oh, right on.
Beautiful, beautiful classic period site. There's a lot of cool discoveries going on there. And it was organized by Shannon Kring Busette, who had produced the film 2012: The Beginning, which is hands down the best film documentary on 2012. But anyway, we were at Azapa. At Copan, and I had just been on this breakneck traveling tour through Mexico and Guatemala, and ended up at Copan as planned. And
Why Copan?
Well, Copan, this is an interesting question. I wanted to be somewhere that was a little bit off the beaten path.
Right.
There was a lot of crazy stuff going on at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan in Mexico. Palenque was a big place where people were going.
Right.
I didn't want to be part of the Carnival 2012.
Right.
Copan seemed, far enough off the beaten track yet compelling enough because it's a classic period Maya site that actually has a couple of really important carved monuments that are dated in very intriguing ways, and beautiful place. I've got friends there. I've done trips down there before with tour groups and stuff, so I felt like that was the place.
And the group around you. I'm sure that the Mayans were there, right? The culture, they're there too because this is a moment for them. How many people were there?
Well, the number of people that were in our tour group was actually quite small. There was about 12 people.
But were there any Mayans themselves that were?
Copan is a little bit off the mark with indigenous people. There are Chorti Maya that live in the area, but many of them, as with many of the Maya people, in fact, they were not so tuned into the 2012 thing.
And that's my point. That's exactly my point. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even though it's a deep part of their tradition, the fact is that the long count calendar fell into disuse centuries ago, and so it became a forgotten aspect of the tradition.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. That's completely crazy. So then what happened that night? Okay. So
well, it was more like the night before. The night before was there was a fire ceremony that was done where we were staying, and there's a whole other context I could get into with this. I'd given my presentation. An amazing Maya scholar named Michael Groff was there.
Right.
He is one of the very few professional Maya scholars who are tuned into the astronomy and are good at deciphering the script, and also sensitive to the 2012 question as being a question worthy of rational investigation.
Right.
And along with him, we had the amazing scholar Barbara McLeod, veteran, amazing. She really was behind a lot of the pioneering breakthroughs in the 1980s.
Right.
And we had her there, as well as David Sadat, who is an archaeologist there at the site of Copan, and it was a very, very, very special time. The time of importance was actually the morning of December 21st. So we were all up early, went down to the site, and we gathered around one of the carvings at Azapa called Stela C, and we did have somebody there who liked, was good at, leading sort of a morning meditation. We all felt that there should be a time of respect and silence. And, Copan on that morning, there were people there, but it was not a madhouse by any stretch of the imagination. So we all spent about 10 hours at the site that day. There was actually a phenomenal breakthrough discovery that happened through the work of Michael Groff that got consolidated that morning.
What was that?
Well, it's sort of like it had to do with some of the dates on this Stela C, this monument, and Michael was able to decipher the dates in such a way that he found the key to understanding how the dates worked, and he was able to figure out that there were these patterns and parallels that basically highlighted the position of the sun.
Oh, I remember this. I remember reading about this. Yes.
Yeah, because the position of the sun on December 21st of 2012, on the solstice, it's right there at the crossroads of the Milky Way and the ecliptic. And this is the whole galactic alignment scenario that's been the centerpiece of my work, and how the Maya calculated it and how it fits into their mythology and their symbolism. But what Michael found is that there were other date patterns that had to do with these kinds of ways of portraying the sun at the crossroads, and it basically affirmed that they were indeed interested in this and tracking it.
Now, with the galactic alignment, and I don't want to be a skeptic or play the position of that, but without being able to see the planets, or all of the planets, of course there are a few that are visible to the naked eye, but how in the world was, I say this almost every night on the show, coincidence? I mean, how is that possible?
Well, this is where we have levels of misinformation in the marketplace around what the galactic alignment is. I've got the picture in the upper left corner of the gallery, which portrays the Milky Way, and the horizontal dotted line is the ecliptic. That's the path followed by the sun, moon, and planets.
Okay, everybody open up picture number 1, upper left. It's black and white. It's a graphic, and take us through it.
Well, what we see is the Milky Way, obviously, and there's this feature along the Milky Way called the Dark Rift. It's caused by interstellar dust clouds, and the Maya mythologized that as the road to the underworld. And so it was part of their mythology and their religion, and it was related to concepts of like the birthing place in the sky and this kind of thing. But the astronomy of this is that the horizontal line represents the ecliptic, which is the path followed by the sun, moon, and planets. And the A, B, and C positions, that's the changing position of the December solstice sun in the sky.
Gotcha.
Over thousands of years. This phenomenon, and what causes this, is called the precession of the equinoxes. It's a real astronomical thing, it's caused by the Earth slowly wobbling on its axis. It effectively changes the position of the sun in the sky on the equinoxes and the solstices. So in this picture, what I'm showing is like position A of the sun in relation to the Milky Way. That's where the December solstice sun was, say, 6,000 years ago. So it's quite far from the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, through the millennia, the sky is shifting. The position of the December solstice sun is shifting closer and closer and closer until in the years around 2012, you have the sun at position C on the solstice, lined up with the dark rift and the Milky Way. Now, the Milky Way looks quite wide, but there is this lateral midline of the Milky Way called the galactic equator. And this is what the galactic alignment is. It's the alignment of the December solstice sun with the galactic equator in the sky. And it is something that's just visually I mean, it's perceived from the vantage point of Earth, or at least we can say that it was something that the Maya were tracking and would have projected forward to. I mean, obviously you can't see it, visually when it's occurring because the sun is right there, but the Maya were able to project and extrapolate and calculate things like this. The big question as to how they calculated or even noticed this slow shifting of the heavens called the precession of the equinoxes, well, that's been worked out recently in the work of Michael Grove. And so that's part of the real breakthrough that's been going on in this whole discussion just in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been pretty much sort of covered over by the doomsday noise.
Well, do the odds of the sun on December 21st lining up in the center of the Milky Way for the galactic alignment, was this, again, I'm asking a very, very direct question, was this just something that was discovered by us, or did the Mayans actually have that knowledge? And
right. That's a great question. Yeah. And that's the question I asked myself back when I noticed that this galactic alignment fact of astronomy was happening right at the time of the Maya calendar cycle ending. So we can go down 2 paths with this. We can say, it just must be a coincidence, end of story. For me, I said, well, that is pretty interesting. Let's start digging into the evidence.
Right.
I started asking myself questions. Where was the long count created? What did those people think about the sky?
Right.
And so my work started to amass evidence from many different disciplines of Maya studies: archaeology, ethnography, iconography, epigraphy, especially at the site of Izapa, and so what I was able to show is that they were very, very interested in this part of the sky. I mean, the dark rift in the Milky Way is right there. That's called the Xibalba Bay, the road to the underworld. That is a very, very important feature in the Maya creation myth. This place where the sun is aligning, it's at the cross in the sky. Notice in the picture, it looks like it's the Milky Way is kind of at a 60-degree angle to the horizontal ecliptic, but that cross formed by the Milky Way and the ecliptic is recognized by scholars as being the crossroads, the sacred tree, as Linda Sheely put it. And it wasn't just Linda Sheely who took this up. It's really something that you see in the symbolism of the carvings and so on. So a lot of this is based in the academic work that was previously done. I sort of assembled all the pieces. And so to answer your question, yeah, I guess you might want to start out entertaining that it's a coincidence, but as the evidence keeps amassing, coincidence gets ruled out, and you end up with the scenario that I reconstructed in my book, Maya Cosmogenesis 2012.
So December 21st, just so my tiny brain can absorb and I can achieve true temporal meltdown. December 21st, the sun was in the center of the Milky Way. Am I correct on that? I just want to clear this up.
Well, yes, because the center of the Milky Way, there's 2 things going on here. I hate to be providing all these caveats, but this is where a lot of the misunderstandings arise from.
Thank you.
Astronomers would like to dismiss this whole thing by saying that the center of the Milky Way is a very precise point in the sky. And that point, you can kind of see in that picture a little bit, the center of this bulge, it's called the nuclear bulge of the galactic center. That's what would be of importance to a naked eye sky watching culture like the Maya. They'd look up at the Milky Way and they could notice this wider and sort of bulging part of the Milky Way. That is the galactic center, it can be visually perceived on that level, and the Maya mythologized it as like the womb, the bulging, pregnant womb of a celestial, like cosmic mother goddess figure. The astronomers would like to say, no, it's a precise point. And then, well, the sun isn't exactly on that point. And so from that vantage point, the naysayers will say the sun doesn't align with the galactic center. But see, they're reducing it to these abstract definitions that have no meaning for a naked sky-watching culture. What the Maya did is they mythologized the scenario as the union of the cosmic father deity, the December solstice sun,
right,
with the womb of the cosmic mother deity. Beautiful. Beautiful. It works perfectly.
It does.
In the mythology. We're not talking about some scientific, almanac. I mean, obviously the calculation process had to be following some kind of scientific rigor in order for them to project forward to it with, really good accuracy. But it was really more in service to the formulation of the philosophy and the creation myth that goes along with it.
Where this is where I'm just astonished, and again, I need you to either correct me or tell me that I'm right. But I think that December 1st date and the alignment that happened it can't be a coincidence. There's too much time that we're dealing with here. It's wrong. So, but I think in order for them to fall on that date and where everything starts anew from that day forward, and we've got a new calendar moving forward, and I get that, it seems like they started from December 21st and worked backwards, because it's not going to happen again, the alignment, and it's astonishing to me that they were able to pull that off, and it's not it's real. The calendar is real. You can look at it, you can touch it.
It's rooted in an actual empirical event in the sky, in an empirical real alignment in the sky. The galactic alignment was calculated by European astronomer Jean Meus in his book Mathematical Astronomy Morsels, and it's been calculated by a few other astronomers. The poster boys for 2012 debunking, like the guys at NASA,
right?
They're on record, and a few others who shall remain nameless, that they basically just even deny that the galactic alignment is a real thing, and they will invoke things like this thing that I mentioned about an abstract point for the galactic center. But you're absolutely right, Jimmy. Though I think that the ancient Maya must have fixed the calendar to the cycle ending in 2012 first, and then back calculated everything.
It's the only thing that makes I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for cutting you off, but it's the only thing that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the big question. I mean, it seems so simplistic to even say it, but if you arrange the couple of different things going on, it boggles the mind, and you would have to be a very, very strong devotee of coincidentalism in order to even begin with the place that coincidence is a reasonable position to take on this.
Well, you make me feel sane, is what you do. Okay, that's. I just have to say, there's just no way to look at it from any other point of view. Oh, you know what? You just reminded me of something when you and I were talking earlier today, and I said that I thought that I met you at a NASA gathering, right?
Yeah, right.
After this conversation, obviously you were not there. Not with this group of guys, I can promise you that. Okay, let's go to picture number 2 really quick. And what are we looking at here?
To the right of
to the right, in the middle of the first row.
Well, this is another way that the galactic alignment can be looked at, but it's from the, putting the horizon of the site of Izapa. In the sky there, of course, in the background, you have the Milky Way arching over the December solstice sunrise position. So from 3500 BC to 1000 BC to 2012, actually you should sort of see the Milky Way right over the sun there at the 2012 position.
Right.
But anyway, so they've been coming into alignment. It's just like that previous picture, but here we're seeing it from the vantage point of the ball court at the site of Izapa. This is like ground zero, you might say, of the 2012 prophecy. There's all these monuments. I've got a few of them numbered here. In the foreground, you see these 6 oval-shaped stones. These are seats. These are real things that were found in the archaeology of this site. So we know people were sitting on these stone seats. And looking out over the ball court, there's a throne, and on the front face of this throne is a head coming out from between the legs of a deity. It's facing down the lengthwise axis of this ball court towards the December solstice sunrise.
That's incredible.
And in the sky, the birthplace in the sky is the dark rift feature, which you can kind of see in the Milky Way.
Right.
So the solar godhead coming out from between the legs, the birthplace on the throne, is reflecting the astronomy that's going on down the ball court towards which the throne faces.
There, when you live in Denver now, and how awful is the view of the Milky Way from there? Well, you could just say
it's not that great. I mean, you can go up into the mountains pretty quickly and get some nice views.
And what most people, I live here in Los Angeles, and with the reflection of the lights, I look up and I see like 2 stars, right? there's nothing there. But when I lived in Panama, and I would stand out there, and I remember the first time I saw the Milky Way for real. And right now the listeners that are listening to me, they can't appreciate what I'm about to say. You can't, because you've never seen it. But you go down, and I remember looking up, and I turned to my friend, and I was like, "What?" He goes, "Dude, that's the Milky Way."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh my God, that is insane!"
Jimmy, I had a similar experience at the site of Tikal in 1988. Tikal is in the middle of nowhere in northern Guatemala, and back then it was like string your hammock between the trees and hope that the crocodiles don't eat you. And you're so far away from any light pollution. I had the same experience. I look up at the night sky and I was like, "Oh my God, that's the Milky Way! I can't believe it."
It is insane to see, and I miss it. And I know that there's places here in the United States you can get away from the light pollution, but pretty much the United States is just lit up in general. You need to just be away from the light. And when you look up into an unpolluted night sky and truly look, and you can see what the ancients saw, and it was like the best Steven Spielberg movie experience. You just stand there all night and just look, because it's unbelievable. And here in the United States and here in LA, it's disgusting what you can see here. And so when I look at this illustration, and that's what I'm trying to say, that's what I saw. Right. And that's what the ancients saw. Okay, let's go down. Enough about me. What do the numbers represent here? 69, 67, and 60.
Well, those are just the numbers of the carved monuments. I'll point out the monument 60 off in the distance by where the sun is.
Okay.
It's on the far side of the ball court. What I can say about this monument is that it depicts the hero twins in the ball game. The hero twins are like they're sons of the deity who got his head cut off by the Dark Lords, and the hero twins vow to avenge the death of their father, and in fact, by the end of the myth, they resurrect their father and reinstate him as the true, new a world age ruler. They put him back on his throne, and that's all a metaphor for the rebirth of the sun, which is going on in the sky, of course, over these long period of time. At the end of the age, at the end of the creation myth, the father of the hero twins basically gets reborn. He passes through the dark rift in the sky. But on this particular monument, 60, it shows the hero twins standing over a fallen bird deity. This bird deity is also in the creation myth. He is called Seven Macaw. He is the vain and false ruler who appears at the end of the age to distract and deceive humanity. He's like the archetype of megalomania. And he's actually the chief of the underworld lords. And so he's somehow behind the decapitation of their father, and the hero twins have to do away with the bird deity and all the other dark lords before they can succeed in resurrecting their father. And so this monument depicts the demise of the bird deity at the hands of the hero twins, which is the thing that must happen before the sun can get reborn at the end of the age. So, I mean, the package is complete with all these monuments here in the ball court, the metaphor of the ball game for the rebirth of the sun. I mean, to read these things is quite straightforward, and it seems like this message was set in stone at the site of Izapa as a kind of a mystery play that would be read by the initiates going around the site.
It's a shame, the Spanish didn't have a clue. They didn't see the sophistication. They just they saw what they saw, and it's just an absolute. The sophistication is just it twists your mind into
but
pieces.
But luckily, this site survived. It was abandoned about 1,800 years ago, and it just got covered in jungle. And then in the 1950s, the archaeologists found it all and cleared it off. But the funny thing is that the archaeologists never noticed that the ball court lines up with the position of the December solstice sun on the horizon.
And it's not, again, it's not a coincidence.
It can't be.
And were you able to, are those thrones still there? And the seats, did you actually sit?
I have sat on that throne, yeah.
Wow.
And I deduced, I was at Izapa in 1990. I didn't really know what it was at that time, but I've gone maybe 15 times since then. But I deduced and figured out that the ball court lines up with the December solstice sun. That was not in the literature, but it's quite apparent, just from knowing the site. And that has proven to be the key. And I've wanted to share this key, in the documentaries that were coming out. And I can, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the frustrating things that I was not able to get any of the documentary producers to represent this.
So
this work.
Did you actually, okay, I'm just going to ask you directly. Did they videotape it, and did it end up on the cutting room floor? Were you, did you get it across, but it didn't make the final cut?
Well, case by case, NBC did go down there with me in 2009, and we went to the site, but they were more interested in kind of doing an Indiana Jones type thing, and so they focused more on the footage of me in the river with the rafting guide. I think they had a few little bits and pieces, snippets from around Izapa, but they didn't have a portrayal. They didn't use the footage of me explaining the whole alignment scenario in the ball court. And then, of course, Sean Paul, his documentary, which was called 2012 The End, with a question mark, that came out in 2012, and he did a good job because we spent several days there and portrayed the ball court and everything. So that's one of the few.
That was one of the better documentaries, actually. But when you look at this, the way that it's here in the diagram, It's one of the biggest things for me. I mean, you're looking at the alignment. It's apparent, and the sophistication is just mind-boggling. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
Izapa was thriving for at least 400 years, between about 400 BC and, year zero. So they had plenty of time to notice that the Milky Way and the December solstice sun were moving closer and closer together. I think that idea that is behind 2012 is that at some future date, Father Sun and Mother Galaxy are going to be joined. What a compelling, amazing thing. I think that was mythologized into the creation myth. And then they set about the business of trying to figure out and calculate when exactly it was going to occur. And that was the motivation behind the institution of the long count calendar about 2,000 years ago.
I was just going to ask you if the Mayans were influencing everybody else around them, or were they actually learning from some of the other cultures around there? And then I just got this email in, and so I'm just gonna. This is how smart the listeners are. How are the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, and the Maya related? Did the Maya inherit knowledge from these other cultures? That's from Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's a vast flow of different cultures and civilizations throughout Mesoamerican history, and yeah, the Maya were influenced by earlier phases of the culture. I think something unique happened at Izapa that led to this unique thing called the long count in 2012. This question sometimes is sort of fishing for the ultimate thing where the Olmec, were influenced by the Egyptians or the Atlanteans, and then it goes back, to some, civilization or something.
That's right.
And who knows, really? What I like to emphasize is that, well, yeah, certainly all of the cultures, there was a lot of long-distance trade going on. The 260-day calendar was already spread throughout all of Mesoamerica. That was like the universal clock, of all the cultures. But there were also innovative things and unique discoveries that happened at different places, and I think that's what happened here at Izapa.
Do we know any more about the Olmecs than we do the Maya? I mean, there's not a whole lot there, is there? I mean, I try to study and research as much as I can, and it just seems like we can only go so far, and then it gets into conjecture. And
yeah, I know, and it's hard to tease out any kind of conviction out of some of these things. The Olmec are pretty strange. They, especially the monuments that survive. We do know that at the site of La Venta, this is something I discovered pretty early on. There's a brilliant archaeologist named Marion Popenoe Hatch who studied the site of La Venta Olmec site that goes back to about 2500 BC. And she noticed that in her archaeological work that the buildings were all lined up in a line that was pointing towards the Big Dipper constellation that revolves around the pole star in the north. And then she noticed that, but at this deeper archaeological level, it seems like all the buildings were pointed a few degrees further to the west. And then further down, there's another level, and the buildings are oriented slightly different. So she reconstructed that the Olmec were adjusting the orientation of their buildings to account for the shifting of the precession of the equinoxes.
I can't get my mind around that. I can't. It just melts my brain.
Well,
we're talking about. Yeah, I understand that, but we're talking about a 16,000 year cycle, and to adjust. I mean, it is such a minute. Why would they care? And how would they notice? You would have to literally stand there and mark for such a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years to see anything.
I think they had an innate fascination with the cycles around them, and they needed to be correctly oriented to the universe. That was kind of a big thing. They needed to understand, because if they had a temple and the king occupied the throne, that king symbolically occupied the center of the cosmos. And the whole temple had to be correctly oriented to the center of the cosmos. Well, if the sky overhead was shifting and the orientations weren't like they fell out of balance, and the temple wasn't really aligned correctly with the larger universe anymore, they had to redo it, because they needed to be harmoniously in phase with the larger universe around them. That's kind of how they thought about things.
Do we have any idea how they actually did these measurements? Because when it's one thing to think about the sun during the day, but at night when you're looking at the Milky Way, you don't have, you don't have shadows. In an accurate sense. So, did they have sticks in the ground that were lining up, to where the stars were on one day and then the next? I mean, how do we have any idea how they got that done?
Yeah, one way to do it. It's the same methods that were used by many of the cultures around the world. It could be something like this. Tracking the equinox is really simple. Because it's halfway between the solstices and it's where the sun rises. It defines east, basically. So figuring out where the solstices and the equinoxes are, that's pretty basic. They were doing it at Stonehenge and all these other places.
Right. Well, that's a sunrise, and you're looking at the horizon, and you and I could get that done. Okay.
And then they might observe a bright star like what would be a Capella would be a good guide star for this. They'd observe Capella rises in the east exactly 6 days after the equinox. And that would be the anchor point. 6 days after the equinox, Capella makes its first appearance in the eastern skies. Well, that's going to shift slowly. In the lifetime of one sky watchers, let's say 70 years, that rise date is going to shift by 1 day. And then his grandson is going to track it, and his grandson, and it's going to be shifting 1 day every 72 years. And that's how they, once they were sort of aware that there was something going on up there with the shifting of the skies, they would start to, record their almanacs and the rise times and things like that.
And that was your gig. That was your job.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there were specialized classes. There were the scribes. There were the day keepers who tracked the days. There were the sky watchers. There were all kinds of different roles to play in the society.
I just got this email in. Jimmy, it should say John. Why? I can't answer this. Why couldn't astrology have been passed down to the Maya, and then the knowledge of how to practice astrology would be known to them? Astrology in ancient science, and perhaps the Maya were masters of it.
Well, it certainly could have been, but passed down from earlier guilds of sky watching professionals, or I sense that maybe there's a case being made for, I don't want to express this too bluntly, but there's a very common reflexive interpretation that I see very, very often, that the people living in Mexico were savages, and they didn't do anything very important until somebody or a group of people arrived from somewhere else. Maybe they were extraterrestrials, maybe they were Egyptians, maybe they were Atlanteans. But basically the people here in the Western Hemisphere were savages, and they needed to be educated by somebody coming in from the outside. I find this to be a bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit offensive, I think.
Yeah.
It assumes and denies that the indigenous inhabitants of this continent had any kind of genius of their own.
Exactly.
What flies in the face of that is the fact that indigenous farmers working in central Mexico, beginning about 8700 BC, worked for centuries and centuries and centuries to domesticate a skinny wild grain called teosinte. It looks like a little spliff of barley. And they domesticated that over many, many centuries into the juicy corn kernels that we know today, called maize. That does not seem to be the work of
A
primitive
doofus.
savages.
Yes. And no credit. Zero credit. And, okay. Another email. I've got lots of email. It's starting to stack up, but it's always good and it's always brilliant. And you're going to love this. On December 21st, 2012, we had a huge party. I thought I was thinking ahead, so I put all the food and booze on my credit card. I was bummed out the next day when I realized I still had to pay for it. Seriously. Great to hear.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is actually. I
mean, that's part of the genre of jokes,
Yeah, exactly. Seriously, this is, and let me continue. Seriously, great to hear someone that knows their stuff about the Mayan. And I think the race of people, and I think that race of people are gone. Are there still people today that call themselves true Mayans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course, yes, there are 6 million pure-blood Maya people living in Guatemala today. They've been the subject of the genocidal tactics of death squads in the 1980s. There's different Maya groups. The Mam, the Kekchi, the Tzutuhil, the Quiche. They speak different languages. There's a lot of differentiation going on. Many of them still follow the 260-day calendar and preserve rituals and beliefs and knowledge that goes back thousands of years.
What about the language? What about the language? I'm sorry for cutting you off. I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
What about the language?
The language is very interesting. That's a whole specialized field in Maya studies as well. In fact, one of the revolutions in deciphering the Maya script is to recognize the phonetic elements in the script, how it's pronounced. And they can compare to some of the modern or more modern language dictionaries on how words are pronounced. The languages are very differentiated, and some of them, like among the Quiche, they don't really have a tense. Like everything is now, basically.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the interesting things.
Is it still spoken in Central America?
For sure.
And different dialects, or do Mayans in Guatemala and Mayans in Honduras or Costa Rica or southern Mexico? I mean, do they understand each other?
No. There's not only different dialects. There's completely different languages, and this speaks to the sort of insular specialization and the traditional ways. Like it wasn't that long ago. Like just going back to the 50s and 60s and 40s, I think that there were still very, very remote areas of the highlands of Guatemala, especially where a Maya person might be born, live out their 65 years of life, and never travel more than 10 miles away from their home village. So there were a lot of cultural groups that didn't really get a lot of exposure to the outside world. A lot of that's changing now.
Wow, that's interesting. So they didn't trade a whole lot or communicate between the cities? Wow, that's, okay.
Well, some of them did. There were traders, but some of them just stayed home, and so they some of them were getting around, but like the Maya people today, it was one of those sort of tropes in the discussion you'd hear a lot. Oh, the Maya people disappeared. Why did the Maya disappear? Well, they didn't disappear. The Maya civilization collapsed in about 900 AD, and the tens of thousands of citizens kind of just dispersed, and set up shop elsewhere. In the highlands of Guatemala, there was a cultural resurgence in around 1200 AD, and that led to a lot of these groups you see there today. And they were the descendants of the classic Maya cities.
Well, I've heard, well, we all have, so I'll get your take on this. But, what exactly happened? Did they starve themselves out? Were they able, did they thirst themselves out? Did they run out of wood? What was the reason for, because it was sudden and it was immediate, and we don't know really why. I've heard so many different ideas. What do you think happened?
Well, I believe that it was a combination of factors. This will sound a bit dry, perhaps, but it was a combination of factors, including the burning of the jungles in central Guatemala there in the Petén. And that led to deforestation and soil erosion and famine. There was a drought that happened around that time that was probably the final straw on the camel's back. But a lot of the reason behind this excess that led to these things was the greed and corruption of the ruling class.
Well, the burning of the jungles, that was for construction? Not burning the wood, but they were using that for stone and mortar, and
they had to burn it to make the plaster that covered all the temples.
Right, exactly. And so that was, it wasn't, they weren't burning wood, for cooking, but they were using it up in mass because they needed to make the plaster and mortar and get it to a certain temperature. Is that
exactly?
Okay. All right. I want to go to illustration number 3 before we get into, I want to discuss the actual 4 specific codices and what they say, where they are, and how they got there.
Okay.
To me, that's very important. I want to go to the alignments that you have on November 28th and 6/12.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. And, of course, December 21st, 2012.
I'm so glad we're moving through these pictures sequentially like this, because they do sort of tell a story. Well, in that bottom part of the picture, you see December 21st of 2012, and somewhat similar to the first picture we looked at, you can kind of vaguely see the Milky Way kind of arching in an arc.
Yep.
It's not that easy to see in this picture, but it's that sort of bluish line that arcs sort of horizontally through the picture. That's the galactic equator and the Milky Way, and the sort of vertical line, the green line, is the ecliptic, again, the path traveled by the sun, moon, and the planets. So what we have here is a picture of the galactic alignment, the solstice sun lining up with this crossroads in the sky on December 21st, 2012. So the big thing here is the upper picture. We basically see the exact same alignment scenario, except it's a different date, November 28th of the year 612 AD. We see the sun in the crossroads. It's not the solstice. In 612 AD, this alignment happened some 20 days before the solstice, because it's the precession of the equinoxes that is bringing all of these factors into convergence and alignment. What this means is that throughout Maya history, there were different dates when this, or sort of a cousin to the galactic alignment, happened. But they happened on dates that weren't the solstice. If you go really far back in Maya history, you see this alignment happening, but it was happening 30 days before the solstice. So this is another way that they were tracking. The critical thing about this date, and why I've paired these two pictures together, November 28th of 612 AD is the birthday of a king named Lord Jaguar. Lord Jaguar carved the Monument 6 text. This is the text that I alluded to earlier in our discussion, Jimmy. It's the 2012 inscription that came to widespread attention in the year 2006 and forced scholars to start paying closer attention to 2012 as a real artifact of Maya thought. Now, this carved monument from Tortuguero has 13 dates on it, including the 2012 date, of course.
Uh-huh.
Why did Lord Jaguar carve this monument? Well, if we study this monument, it seems that he was trying to make a case that he had a special connection with this far future period ending when the world was going to be reborn. The era was going to shift, and we'd have a transition to the new era. Kings liked to do this kind of thing, right? They liked to, it was sort of like propaganda in a sense.
Absolutely.
If they could demonstrate that they had a special connection with the mechanics of the creation myth and time, well, that's a real big boost in the propaganda department. How did he do that? He pointed out that he was born on a day when the sun was in the same position that it was going to be in 2012.
Oh, man.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. This was the confirmation for the earlier work that I did at Izapa. And it came through the careful, scrutinizing work of, again, Michael Grove, who is a very amazing Maya scholar who's been sensitive to the astronomy. He got his PhD from University of California in 2007 and all that. So he's the real deal, and he noticed this fact about the Tortuguero inscription. So it's I mean, and this just came out in 2009. So there was a lot of confirming things that happened that really helped the whole picture gel and confirmed that the galactic alignment, which again, most people are going to roll their eyes just when they hear that phrase. Galactic alignment, what is that, some kind of mystical mumbo-jumbo? No, it's real astronomy, and here's the evidence that the Maya were interested in it and were tracking it. And, you know, this is just one.
It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary when you think about it. Not scary, frightening, scary, and like, man, you know, this is real knowledge. And I have to ask you really quick.
Sure.
There's something conspicuously missing on December 21st. It's the moon. And where is the moon in this alignment?
Let's see if I can remember. There wasn't much else really going on that was of interest. I mean, people will say, "Oh, there was an alignment of planets." No, that wasn't really an alignment of planets. I can't really recall. I should know this. I think the moon was waxing to fullness. So I probably have that wrong, but it's not in that picture right there.
Yeah, just wondering. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the next. I'm wondering. I want to. Let's go to the picture number 4.
Well, this one we could deal with real quickly. We could have a huge discussion around this, but I was amazed to discover what this shows. It's a modern construct. It was done by an architect named Jorge Gonzalez Chong, who was commissioned by the state of Chiapas to do this monument park near Izapa. And what he chose to do was utilize my 2012 alignment theory in showing the game ball as the sun going through the goal ring. You kind of see that in the picture here.
Right.
There's this huge orange ball, and the ring behind it has the glyphs on it like the Milky Way. And he basically lined this up in such a way that if you're there on the morning of the December solstice, you will see the sun coming up behind this sculpture and the sun shining through the goal ring. So it's a really cool replication of what's going on in the ball court at Izapa that we saw earlier, which is actually only about a mile away from where this monument park was built.
You know what I find I much more fascinating in this picture is the count that's happening right behind, right there, and there it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, right.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, and that's going to the left. Everybody, you want to know how the Mayans counted their numbering system?
Yeah.
It's right there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it continues left. It completes the circle. And what's the number that we're looking at as it comes back around to 1?
That would be 20.
Why is it 20?
Well, this is one facet of the very clever design that they did. If you looked at it from above, you would see this count going around the whole thing in a big circle. So it counts from 1 to 13, or I'm sorry, it counts from 1 to 20, and it does that 13 times. So 1 to 20, 1 to 20, 1 to 20, all the way around this big circle, and it does it 13 times. Those are the numbers of the 260-day calendar, which is constructed from 13 day signs. 13 numbers combined with 20 day signs. So the 13 and the 20, 13 times 20 is 260.
I just wanted you to explain it. I knew you'd do it better. But isn't that, I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. And now, This is the thing. When did we crack the glyphs? And when did we crack the numbering system? Because it wasn't until, modern times that we actually did this. I forget the lady's name that actually did it. Well,
Linda Sheely was very involved in that. Linda Sheely.
Okay.
And Barbara McLeod was also involved in that. David Stewart. The numbering system, some of the early breakthroughs happened as long ago as the 1880s. But that was just on figuring out, the dots are ones and the bars are fives, and that kind of thing. But the glyphs, it really didn't happen until after the 1970s. And the 1980s, there was a lot of breakthroughs. It's still ongoing.
I know it's just crazy. I have to. The reason why I'm asking such a question like that is because most people don't understand that this is very recent stuff. This is all new discovery. It's ongoing every day, and when it leads up to something like 2012 and December 21st, and all of this hyperbole, all of this conjecture, and based around that, and all of the fear and everything else, we really didn't know a whole lot. You did. What I mean is the experts that were scaring the crap out of us were basing it on nothing, and that's how I feel. And I'm glad you're here to explain it. Let's go to picture number 5, right in the middle.
Right in the middle, that basically shows the Maya spiritual guides that we brought to the site of Izapa in 2010. I helped launch a nonprofit called the Maya Conservancy, and we've done a lot of work to provide educational experiences for the Maya as well as for participants coming in. And as a nonprofit, we funnel the proceeds back into the Maya villages. What we did here at Izapa was something very special because Izapa, of course, as I've alluded to, is the origin of the calendars and the 2012 mystery. Yet it's in Mexico. It's only about 15 miles from the Guatemala border, but it is in Mexico, and because of that, it's a really crazy situation in Mexico where the Mexican government does not allow the Maya to come into the temple sites to do ceremony and ritual.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's a point of great contention. Across the border in Guatemala, they do. The Guatemalan government lets the Maya come into the sites and burn incense and do fire ceremonies and stuff. So we kind of pulled off a miracle in that we were able to have the Maya come in and do this ceremonial fire ritual, which is sort of like, these temple sites and the special places that the Maya like to go, they're sort of like spiritual, sacred spaces. But they need to be activated and fed with ceremony and fire ceremony. Now, Izapa has been basically dormant as a ritual site for centuries because there's no Maya that really live around that area in southern Mexico. Right. So we had these traditional Quiche and Quechua and Mam Maya come in through the auspices of a wonderful man named Don Alahar, Don Roberto Chanchavac.
Okay, there you go.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just my memory sometimes goes. But his associates, came in, and we did this wonderful fire ceremony at the site of Izapa. The picture shows the creation of the altar, and we are basically standing about 30 yards away from the ball court right there.
What's the? Let's go to picture number 6, the fountain.
Yeah.
I know there's a story here, so.
Yeah, the story here relates to this picture and the following picture on the lower left, which is from my book, My Cosmogenesis 2012. Notice how similar in the pictures basically are. Of course, I'm a great fan of Darren Aronofsky's movies. The Fountain, I thought, was a brilliant movie. It dealt with certain themes around death and immortality, and I was blown away by that movie. But there's a whole thing I thought maybe we could get into. It's kind of interesting how I think Aronofsky was probably influenced by my book, My Cosmogenesis 2012. And there's a couple of reasons why I say that, but the point is that he sort of got it. And if there's one area of the media culture where I can happily point to and say that however it happened, by hook or crook or accident or coincidence, the movie The Fountain really nailed it in terms of portraying a core idea in the Maya teachings. And that is the idea that we do not cheat death. No, we do not touch eternity by living forever. We touch eternity by embracing death.
Exactly. That's well said. That's actually true.
So there's a profound teaching in this that actually relates very closely to the 2012 stuff.
Wow.
And we could get into all that, but yeah.
With everything that went wrong with 2012, December 21st, what actually went right? I mean, for you, I mean, how do we look to the future when we talk about 2012? I mean, we can talk about what went wrong till the cows come home. And
right.
Actually, and I'm sure there's a lot of unemployed prophets out there right now that are dealing with that, and that's what they've got coming to them. But what went right with 2012?
Well, I have a clearer view of this now that a year and a half has elapsed, or thereabouts. I mean, I could talk about this from the vantage point of my own 25 years of effort to share these things, and there was a lot of frustrating things that did happen, but I think there were breakthroughs that happened. There was another 2012 inscription discovered and announced in June of 2012 from a site called La Corona. Provides even more evidence for the astronomy perspective interpretation. I think one can make a case that the big charade in the whole thing is now exposed as being false. The doomsday notion. That's obviously been cast aside. So now perhaps we can go back and have a clearer view on the things that were going on amidst all the noise. And I say this with some amount of inner conflict, because I recognize that for most people it's now a past tense, done topic, and nobody really cares anymore. But my hope is that we can continue to look at the Maya world, what's going on in the Maya world, this is where what's been going on in the Maya world maybe can really start to flower. Because I talk about this in my book, The 2012 Story, that there's a Maya renaissance going on. And the more we can reach out in collaboration and community towards the Maya, the more we'll build bridges and work together. And with that kind of attitude in mind, that is the path through, I think, to trying to build a more sustainable world.
That was the thing is, and you're right, but there was such a large section of society that was looking at 2012 as a change, not only for humanity, whether it could be apocalyptic but some drastic change, but also a personal change for themselves. They were expecting and put a lot of hope and a lot of eggs in a basket where they were looking for something to change for themselves too. And there was a big expectation there. And December 22nd rolls around and it was just another day. And they were crushed. I mean, people put a lot of emotion and life-changing things and thoughts onto that day, and then they found out that, you know what, they were listening to the wrong people. And the next day they just realized, they woke up and it was just another day. Their life hadn't changed.
But there was something real inside of the discussion that could have been looked at maybe more deeply. It was the perspective that I came to understand really from the Maya creation myth itself, and it can be languaged in a more modern way that is maybe more accessible. It's basically that we can't just sit around waiting for the universe to change us, and I think maybe that's what a lot of people were doing. They got this idea from a lot of sources in the 2012 discussion that something was fated to happen automatically to the earth, to us, whether it's doomsday or enlightenment. But well, what are we? Are we just robots in a predetermined universe or something?
And what were the expectations? And when leading up to 2012, you must have been part of panels and discussions, and you were invited out to this conference and that conference. You were probably booked every day of the year. And I'm not being facetious. You were probably
well, to be honest, it was pretty busy, especially in the months leading up to December.
I can only imagine. And so you must have been sitting on certain panels where you just had to bite your tongue. You had to just bite your lip and let these people speak when you knew that A, they were wrong, and B, they were also, you look out into the audience where they were like mesmerized, listening to these people speak, and they were basing their futures on a load of crap.
Yeah, that made me quite frustrated. In fact, I started to decline a lot of those types of conferences because I sat through those panels, and I mean, I would sit through a 2-hour moderated panel discussion, and I would be able to maybe speak for about a minute and a half during that entire thing, because there's slicker people on the panel that can do the song and dance. I actually started to think that I was kind of being cut out of the conversation, or I wasn't quite saying the things that people wanted to hear. And I don't know, it got pretty frustrating on that level. And I just kept trying to.
You weren't sensational enough.
Yeah, because the message that I'm trying to deliver is that we are indispensable participants in our own awakening or spiritual growth, and that applies not just to 2012, but can apply to any time in our lives. So the responsibility is with us, and one of the key sort of teachings in the Maya creation myth is that in order to open up and awaken and grow, we have to abandon the illusions that keep us stuck. So the idea of sacrifice, which is so central to the Maya world, or surrender perhaps, we have to sacrifice our attachment to the illusions that keep us stuck to a place of limitation in our hearts or souls or minds. And this is really the key to opening up to what the promise of 2012 was, which was to awaken to a direct experience of you might say like a higher perspective, the bigger picture. It's the relationship between the limited ego and this bigger picture, like the good of the whole. And putting the ego back into right relationship with the whole is something that we all need to work on, and that our world in its entirety needs to do if we're to create a sustainable world.
Let's talk about, we're going to end with the future and what we can get out of this, but I only have so much time left with you. And I would just want to talk about some technical things and historical stuff. And I do want to talk about the codices. And so first off, let's define what a codice is exactly, because you can reference that with any culture. So specifically with the Mayans, we know that there are 4. What is a codice? Let's start there. And then I want to talk specifically about the 4 and what they are and where they are.
Sure. Well, a codex is a book, and the Maya did have books, and they were screen-fold books often. They weren't bound on the spine like medieval books are. They were made out of amatl, like bark paper or yucca plant, and they were whitewashed, and there's record a lot of information. They were often used by the oracular priests and who consulted the days, and they were often like almanacs that recorded astronomical alignments and events with eclipses and Venus risings and things like that. They're very, very difficult to decipher, but they were combined with deity names and deity events. So that's what the codexes are.
Now, so there's 4: Dresden, Paris, right? Madrid, and I'm leaving one out. Help me out.
Well, the Grolier is another one. Yeah.
Okay, so there's 4. Now, are the 4 that we're talking about? Why were those the ones that survived? There was a reason why the priest didn't burn those?
With the exception of the Grolier Codex, which was found in a dry cave in Chiapas not too long ago, the 3 other ones were brought back to Europe as curiosities by families of the conquistadors, and they ended up in private collections in Europe and were discovered largely, well, there's different stories around the rediscovery of each one of them, but that's why they're named after European cities.
Because
Madrid,
that's where they live.
Paris.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Okay. So,
and there's great hope that there's possibly others that are in private collections.
But why were those 3 selected to survive?
Oh,
was it random? I mean,
it was random. They didn't know. They're not. It's hard to say like how they compare to the vast corpus of other Maya books, but
well, because the fascinating thing is there's only 4. We're hoping there's more, and there probably is, but right now we have 4. Technically 3 that were smuggled out of Central America, made their way over to Europe, and they weren't selected because they needed to be preserved because of their message. I mean, I would like to be a romantic and say, oh, the Mayan priests, slid it under the table. Get this out of here because this is right. That's not what happened. It's 3 random codexes that made their way to Europe. So let's start with and it's just random. It's just crazy. So there's no specific message. What does the Dresden Codex say? I mean, what do we understand about that?
The Dresden is a nicely preserved codex that contains lists of days, and there's been a lot of progress in deciphering what is going on in the Dresden. There's eclipse tables, almanacs for eclipses. There's almanacs for tracking Mars and Venus. And there are other more odd tables that Michael Groff and other scholars have been looking at that seem to recycle at different patterns. And there are some huge numbers in the Dresden Codex. There's this section called the Serpent series, and there's a lot of symbolism and images in the codices that involve sometimes serpents or deities and other animal figures and stuff like that. The Serpent series projects back tens of thousands of years, and it's often been a question of debate as to how things get interpreted, but what Michael Groff has been able to do is decipher how the Serpent series of the Dresden Codex is basically involved in the tracking of the precession of the equinoxes.
I remember seeing Barbara in a video looking at the Dresden Codex and then finding a couple of symbols on some temples, and was able to start to peel back what that actually these are huge numbers they were looking at, and they you know that some of the symbols and glyphs that were there were actually representing chunks of time, and I was just fascinated with that. But that would just they didn't figure that out till 15 years ago, was it? I mean,
and it was a German librarian named Ernst Forstemann who started to decipher the Dresden Codex in the 1880s, and he figured out some of the basic things with how the long count operates. And it's really a cool story of how intrepid thinkers, many times they were independent from the academic community, deciphered and made key contributions. Maya studies is actually filled with these independent outsiders who made the breakthroughs that were necessary in order to go to another level of understanding. That's why I kind of have a hard time dealing with how contemptuous the current group of Maya specialists have been towards my work, because it's just par for the course. But Barbara McLeod is another amazing scholar, and all of the books are similar in a lot of ways. The Madrid Codex has a big serpent running through it, and it's now thought that the serpent could represent the Milky Way. But there's a lot of similar things going on in there with like an eclipse table and solar positions. I should say something else about the Dresden Codex, though, because there's a section that tracks the position of the Venus morning star.
Right.
And it goes in 8-year cycles, and there seems to be certain glyphs that refer to constellations or like background features like the stars or the Milky Way. And there's one position that has the mouth of a crocodile, and Venus will rise within the boundaries of that dark rift in the Milky Way feature that I talked about earlier. And the dark rift in the Milky Way could also be mythologized as the mouth of the giant crocodile. The Milky Way as a crocodile in the sky. So I think that's a pretty cool confirmation that the dark rift could be thought of as not only a birthplace but also a mouth. And this just points up how the Maya mythologized the sky in different ways. It doesn't mean that they were confused. They were actually creating a rich tapestry of stories that could be used in their creation mythology.
Well, weren't they also, I don't know if it was the Madrid or the Dresden, I can't remember if it was the snake or the in Madrid or the Dresden Codex, but weren't they tracking the planets on one of these too as well?
Yeah. Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions actually happen about every 20 years, and it's thought that the tracking of Jupiter and Saturn, of course, is very prominent in the sky. They come into conjunction with each other once every 20 years, and there's a core period in the long count, the Katun period, which is 7,200 days. That's just under 20 years. So yeah, you're right. There's also even a question. We see this in the intervals between dates in the inscriptional record. You might have on a carved monument dates that are separated by hundreds of years, or even thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. And why would they have two dates right next to each other that were separated by 10,000 plus years? Well, you can look at this and find, as Michael Grof has done, that the tropical year or the sidereal year is evenly divisible into that number of days, which is another confirmation that they were doing some very sophisticated astronomy.
It makes you wonder what, these are random items that were smuggled out of Central America. It makes you wonder what we didn't see.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Okay, so now let's the Paris Codex. What was that about?
Well, this one is much like the others, but it's unique in the sense that it has a zodiac.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And it's a 13-sign zodiac, so it's not 12 signs. And what I reconstructed in one of my earlier books, I had a book published with Borderland Sciences Research Foundation. They were up in Garberville, California. Back in '94 is when they published it. My book was called Zolkin, and it was focused on reconstructing the Maya Venus calendar. But what I figured out is that eclipses can be tracked within the 13-sign zodiac, the way that divides the sky, and that's about all I can recall with the Paris.
Well, and now I want to jump into something else really quick. And I warned you earlier today I was going to go here, but before I do, why, when you have vast oceans in between civilizations and land, and not only that, but you have time. Time is, people want to always reference distance, but you have time between cultures as well. Civilizations came and went, and where there is no obvious communication. But when you're looking to the heavens, how do you connect the dots with coincidence of the zodiac? How can ancient Egypt and other civilizations that have, what is it that they were seeing, and how did they make that connection? Or were they communicating amongst themselves, civilizations, where they made the references to the zodiac? I mean,
well, I think there's several different things that could have been going on there. It depends on the specific thing one's looking at. Like, like for example, in the 1800s, when they started to collect mythology and folklore from around the world, the early mythologists started to find that there were very similar elements and themes going on in these different stories from all these cultures, from all different parts of the world. So one group theorized that, at some point, they must have had boats and they were going all over the place, and there was some grand culture that disseminated these core stories. But another group that was getting more interested into the deep psyche, the collective unconscious, they recognized that, well, no, I mean, it's because we are all human beings. We all are born. We have similar dynamics of growth and crises and change that happens. And the similarity of these stories, like the archetypal themes and characters, are based more in the collective consciousness of humanity than people swapping stories in boats going around the globe. But with something like the 13-sign zodiac, well, I don't know. I would tend to think that a sky-watching culture would look at the ecliptic and want to divide it up into sections so they could track, the planetary movements and say, next month Venus will be in the sign of the Scorpion or something. But there are other stranger things with the Olmec, for example, that suggest that there was possibly significant boat contact going on with other parts of the world.
Well, and I find it fascinating that you can have so many different cultures reference scorpions and fish and bulls and lions. And I'm sorry, when I look up and I look at a constellation, I can't find those zodiac signs with my eyes. But yet it's difficult. And until you point it out and really concentrate, but yet it seems like every civilization was communicating the same way and seeing the same thing.
Yeah, and I want to get into an explanation for that, which will sort of maybe segue into the hot topic you want to talk about. But I'll also say that the Maya zodiac does have animal signs, but they're not the same as the 12-sign Western zodiac. Strangely, there are a couple of constellations that are the same. There's the Scorpion constellation. The Maya have a scorpion at that place, which I think maybe can be explained because there is a pretty definite sort of curved tail sort of effect that's going on with those stars. But the other explanation would be that,
Go there. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want you to frame this. I want you to introduce this with your question.
Okay.
The topic. Yeah.
Is there any sense? Is there any? Is there a connection with the ancient alien hypothesis?
Okay. Well,
I see it. I'll help you out. I see it. I can get it.
Yeah.
I can swallow it and I can digest it.
I can see it if I put my literal glasses on. And I think this can, in my view, in my opinion, I think that there's too much of a problem with literalizing the past. And so what happens is one might encounter basically spiritual doctrines or metaphysical doctrines, and in the mindset of a modern researcher who maybe has gone through scientific training, they will sort of download these things into a literal thing. Now, the perfect example of this, I want to spend a little bit of time on this because it is the perfect example of this, and I always upset people when I point this out. I was curious, as many were, in the work of Zecharia Sitchin, and I didn't find his references to the Maya stuff that compelling or accurate, and I just from the vantage point of having researched that. So I was sort of skeptical about some of his other claims, but I looked into it anyway. The whole thing with going back to the Babylonian cuneiform tablets and looking at the astrological texts, and what he claims is that he found that there was a reference to an invisible planet, like the it's sort of like a planet, but it's not really a planet, and it's invisible. Well, you can look at the astrological texts, and all throughout Babylonia and even Egypt down into Islamic astrology, the lunar nodes were treated as real planets, but they were invisible. The lunar nodes are the places in the sky where the path of the moon and the path of the sun converge, and they indicate where eclipses can occur. Now, the eclipses can only really occur when the sun comes around or the lunar nodes come around to align with the sun. So you see how this is sort of like what Sitchin did is he took this basically astrological doctrine, which has some meaning in terms of metaphysics. Eclipses happen, it transforms humanity. It's the union of opposites. There's all this alchemical stuff that's related to that.
Right.
So the lunar node became an invisible planet that's on some elliptical orbit that comes around to hit the sun, or comes closer into the sun, and then boom, all the gene-fiddling Anunnaki pop out again, or something like that.
Right.
So I have a real difficulty with that, based on the fact that I actually, took his ideas seriously, and I looked into what he was actually saying. But what I identified is that the lunar nodes are the lunar nodes, and that's a pretty common thing. Now, to sort of that's sort of my caveat with the whole thing. But I'm not poo-pooing the whole idea that there are higher dimensional intelligences that human beings can interface with, that can be transformative, or that we can learn from. And my whole take on this comes mainly from the vantage point of shamanism. The Maya were a shamanistic culture. The Maya kings were like high shamans, and you can see this portrayed on all the art. They're doing rituals and communing with the ancestral departed spirits or gods or deities or whatever. And well, we know from the literature on this, with not only ethnographic literature on shamanism, but the experiences of modern travelers to those realms who are using things like ayahuasca. And there's a lot of scientific literature now that indicates that one of the profiles of the experience is encountering discarnate entities, or that are in some sense higher dimensional, and they can be interfaced with, and information or knowledge or healing, different things can happen in those interactions. And I think that is where the discussion can happen around so-called ancient aliens.
Right.
It's not so much hardware spaceships and all this, because the ancient alien theorists, they'll see ancient aliens anytime there's a depiction of an angel or something like that. But I think these have real spiritual existence inside of our collective consciousness, but it's more on a spiritual plane.
Well, where I think I make the connection is they made such a wonderful leap in the knowledge of the stars and the heavens, and it was all so accurately. We're lucky it was carved in stone, and I really mean that, because we wouldn't even know after what the Spanish did. But their knowledge was extreme, and in some sense, it was. It feels more advanced than what their appreciation and the way that they dealt with it was more advanced than the way we deal with it today. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it had to come from somewhere, and I'm okay with that thought. That they were taught, they were shown something from somebody. And it wasn't the Olmecs, and it didn't come from overseas. I just feel like there was somebody communicating to all of those civilizations at the same time. Mm-hmm. And again, when it comes down to the zodiac, it comes down to the way that the Milky Way, it comes down to the equinox, it comes down to a lot of different. How can you have Sumerians and in Egypt and the Olmecs and the Mayans all knowledgeable with a 16,000-year wobble? I just don't. I think that's more universal, and I'm okay with that thought, because it's an easy explanation. It's an easy way out, but it also makes sense. And I'm very comfortable with that. I don't think it's extreme.
I think that's fascinating to explore. I tried to track these things down in my book Galactic Alignment from 2002, which went into the Egyptian origins, and even the Vedic material, the Yuga doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really amazing to consider that the Vedic laws of Manu and the what do they call them? The Vedic
all of those Indian words.
the text.
Yeah, they get it gets away from me. They're
yeah, the texts, and that they had a sophisticated astronomical knowledge that comes from who knows how far back. But this idea of the precession of the equinoxes, the great cycle in the sky, it is sort of like the mystery of the ages. And I think it comes down to us today. It's now like a rediscovered scientific knowledge, but for the ancient cultures, they attached great significance to these kinds of things. It wasn't just an object of contemplation. It was sort of an indication of the great cycles and the great mysterious processes that are going on in the universe of which we are a part.
Well, and we're just learning about, and you just touched upon it. It's one thing to calculate and to measure and to project when you have algorithms and computers sitting right in front of you, let alone just a Texas Instruments calculator sitting on your, and writing utensils and being able to catalog. That's different today. I get that. We can sit here and calculate and photograph and video and satellites. I get that. But they were doing this 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, and for every culture and subculture across the globe, and you can just sit there and go one after another. For them to come to the same conclusion and observe the exact same thing and wonder about the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering maybe it came from a single point source. There's an ignition point. Again, I'm comfortable with that. I don't have any facts, but there's when I look at when you look at the construction, forget about the pyramids around the world. Okay, well, I get that. That's easy. But how about something more basic than that, like windows and steps
right.
and doors? They're all the same. American Indians were doing it in the middle of the desert in North America, but it was, the same thing was in Central America. The same thing was in the Tigris River, and the same thing was going on in China. So I just think that there is a common denominator.
But wouldn't that just come out of the need for making a step or a stair? It doesn't mean that some other source group were traveling around and teaching people how to do those things.
That's a wacky coincidence. And if I say coincidence one more time on this show, I'm going to shoot myself. But but think about what you're saying, John. Just think about that for a second. Talking about pyramids is one thing, but when you just get down to the basics, everybody had the idea of a square window would look good, and let's just, come on. There's just something there that connects everything, and I really truly believe the heavens and ideas and fire and all of that just seem to happen all around the world at the same time. I don't know.
Well, it could have been the 100th monkey phenomenon where
yes.
circumstances developed and it all sort of started to gel at the same time. But there is something very odd about that, and it's a fascinating thing to contemplate. One thing that I've encountered, to get back to what you were sort of alluding to there, is that there is this neuroplasticity in the brain, and the brain can change, and then that defines the perceptions. The Maya, it seems to me, they were processing things in very different ways. That's why it's been so difficult for researchers to really get a grasp on what their worldview was. It almost requires that our own brains go through a transformation in the neural processing circuits or something. It's very difficult for sort of scientific materialists, scholars, to grasp and explain and articulate the insights of the Maya using the tools of scientific materialism. There's a vast, what I call, like a non-dual philosophy, where the Maya perceived the integration of the subjective and the objective realms, of the sky and the earth. It wasn't just a theoretical philosophical belief. It was a direct perception that everything is interconnected. And unless we have the same sort of headsets tuned to the same wavelength, we're going to have a hard time taking that seriously.
Okay, now you made me swallow that. And so suggesting that the point source would be off-world, but not necessarily extraterrestrial. A Genesis.
Well, yeah, it's in my view. I think there is a point. There is an origin point, but it gets more into the deep, like the philosophical discussion of what is the origin of the world, and I don't really believe that can be located in some other planetary system with some other species or something that comes to Earth. I think ultimately it's the infinite, eternal, source matrix from which all manifestation springs, or
right?
Something. Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Heavy. That's good. I might actually use that. Did you just come to that conclusion now, or have you been thinking about that? That's actually.
No, that's a part of my work. I've tried to articulate the spiritual teachings, and I came to interpret through the work of perennial philosophers, like Aldous Huxley, and
right.
And there's some really profound ways of languaging these things that I think do justice to the Maya perspective on things, and that's another reason why I've been sort of mitigated by the professional scholars, because you're not supposed to say things like that.
You're not ever.
No. You're not supposed to say spiritual. If you say spiritual, there goes your career.
Speaking of your career, we're winding down. You might as well just you can stay with me till we roll the end credits here. But I want to let everybody know John Major Jenkins, his website. The links are all on jimmychurchradio.com. You can go there. It'll take you to. He's got a variety of sites, but the filter to all of those sites and to his literature and his books and everything else, you can start at johnmajorjenkins.com.
Right.
And the link is there, and we'll keep it up there forever, so you don't have to worry about that. It will always be there.
Yeah, it's great.
All of your stuff is good. And one of the things, and throughout the conversation tonight, you keep going back. I wrote this this is in my book. Well, you know what? The books are good, and they aren't. It's not a dated material. I don't want anybody to think that it's Mayan. It's 2012. Well, then that knowledge and the reason for those books stopped in December of 2012. That is not the case. And so, what are you doing this year? What's going on in 2014?
Well, in 2014, I'm planning on leading some tours, going back to Copan, and trying to get the first one together for July, but it might get pushed back to August. We would go to the highlands of Guatemala and visit Lake Atitlan. We'd visit a Maya village, traditional Maya village in the highlands. We'd probably do a fire ceremony, perhaps at the site of Iximche, which is a nice site with a fire thing there. And Antigua is a Spanish colonial town. It's quite pleasant, and meet with some friends there, and visit the Jade Museum and the Maya Cosmology Museum that's set up there, and then off to Copan. It's been a couple of years, of sort of rethinking, and I've got some projects I want to get out there, some books and things that I've not really had the opportunity to get out there yet.
Well, exactly. I can only imagine after the maelstrom that was, the last 6 months of 2012, that 2013 you were able to just kick back, relax, and kind of wave your nose at everybody that, I was right. You know, a lot of you were way off track, and so now you're able to rethink and regroup in 2013. I can't imagine all those doomsday, prophets of 2012, how they felt, going into January. And
I'm sure they probably just moved on to the next thing. I am bemused and not surprised. Here we are almost a year and a half later, and as I suspected, for a lot of those writers, it was a trendy thing to be exploited and capitalized on. And I've been continuing to do research, and I publish my research essays on the Center for 2012 Studies website. And just in 2013, I posted another 4 or 5 essays, looking at various aspects of the Maya inscriptions and stuff like that. And I've got a couple of other essays that I'm posting this year. And
do you suppose?
Yeah, the research continues. There's no reason why it should stop. I think that it's really a question of whether or not the breakthroughs and the discoveries that have already occurred are going to get a chance to ever sort of get into a discussion about the ancient Maya astronomy and so on.
Well, here's my prediction. This is what I was just giggling about in the background. Here's my prediction. You're going to have a second wave of how they got the calendar wrong.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's going to be a whole nother thing. And I don't know if it'll be 2014, 2015. They need a couple of years to capitalize on it and to realize their real value. So probably maybe 2016. That's a good round number, 2012. And we'll see a whole resurgence on a recalculation of the Mayan calendar. And here it comes. I don't know what the date is yet, but you heard it from me here first. And I know you've already thought about it. But that's the next phase. That's the next
We'll
step.
see if your prophecy comes true.
Hey, you know what? You can bet on it. I don't think Vegas would take this bet. I'm being honest with you right now. Hey, stay with me before I just say bye. Let's just go ahead. I'm going to roll. I'm going to go ahead and roll the music and read credits, and then we can say goodnight together here at the end.
Okay.
Let's do this thing. And again, John, thank you very much. And I told you how excited I was about doing this, and it was everything and more for me. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I truly did. Jimmy, I really appreciate this and talking to you. I don't do a lot of interviews anymore, or right now, or whatever, but this has been great. This is like the dream interview.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I hope everything is great for you. Anything comes up, you got another book coming out or anything like that, you come and talk to me first, and we'll get it out there. Okay? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just listen to the music. This is my good friend Doug Aldrich, and we'll read credits and say goodnight. Special thanks. Oh, stay tuned, everybody. Coming up next, as always, is Spooky South Coast with Tim Weisberg and his wrinkled shirt. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Komarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. The announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. The music you're listening to him right now is Doug Aldrich. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Say goodnight, John.
Good night.
Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you.